Chapter 4. The True Form and Magnitude of the Earth. The facts and experiments already advanced render it undeniable that the surface of all the waters of the earth is horizontal, and that, however irregular the upper outline of the land itself may be, the whole mass, land and water together, constitutes an immense, non-moving circular plane. If we travel by land or sea, from any part of the earth in the direction of any meridian line, and towards the northern central star called Polaris, we come to one and the same place, a region of ice, where the star which has been our guide is directly above us, or vertical to our position. This region is really the center of the earth, and recent observations seem to prove that it is a vast central tidal sea, nearly 1,000 miles in diameter, and surrounded by a great wall or barrier of ice, 80 to 100 miles in breadth. If from this central region we trace the outline of the lands which project or radiate from it, and the surface of which is above the water, we find that the present form of the earth, or dry land, as distinguished from the waters of the great deep, is an irregular mass of capes, bays, and islands, terminating in great bluffs or headlands, projecting principally towards the south, or at least in a direction away from the great northern center. If we now sail with our backs continually to this central star, Polaris, or the center of the earth's surface, we shall arrive at another region of ice. Upon whatever meridian we sail, keeping the northern center behind us, we are checked in our progress by vast and lofty cliffs of ice. If we turn to the right or to the left of our meridian, these icy barriers beset us during the whole of our passage. Hence we have found that there is a great ebbing and flowing sea at the earth's center, with a boundary wall of ice nearly 100 miles in thickness and 3,000 miles in circumference, that, springing or projecting from this icy wall, irregular masses of land stretch out towards the south, where a desolate waste of turbulent waters surrounds the continents, and is itself engirdled by vast belts and packs of ice, bounded by immense frozen barriers, the lateral depth and extent of which are utterly unknown. The Earth's surface is represented by the diagram, figure 54, and a sectional view in figure 55. N, the central open sea. I, the circular wall or barrier of ice. L, the masses of land tending southwards. W, the waters of the great deep, surrounding the land. S, the southern boundary of ice. And D, the outer gloom and darkness, in which the material world is lost to human perception. How far the ice extends, how it terminates, and what exists beyond it are questions to which no present human experience can reply. All we at present know is that snow and hail, howling winds, and indescribable storms and hurricanes prevail, and that in every direction human ingress is barred by unsealed escarpments of perpetual ice, extending farther than eye or telescope can penetrate, and becoming lost in gloom and darkness. The superficial extent or magnitude of the earth, from the northern center to the southern circumference, can only be stated approximately. For this purpose, the following evidence will suffice. In laying the Atlantic cable from the Great Eastern Steamship in 1866, the distance from Valencia on the southwestern coast of Ireland to Trinity Bay in Newfoundland was found to be 1,665 miles. The longitude of Valencia is 10 degrees 30 minutes west, and of Trinity Bay 53 degrees 30 minutes west, the difference of longitude between the two places being 43 degrees, and the whole distance round the earth being divided into 360 degrees. Hence, if 43 degrees are found to be 1,665 nautical, or 1,942 statute miles, 360 degrees will be 13,000 16,939 nautical, or 16,262 statute miles. Then taking the proportion of radius to circumference, we have 2,200 nautical, or 2,556 statute miles as the actual distance from Valencia in Ireland to the polar center of the Earth's surface. Another and a very beautiful and accurate way of ascertaining the Earth's circumference is the following. The difference of longitude between Heart's Content Station, Newfoundland, and that at Valencia, or in other words, between the extreme points of the Atlantic cable, has been ascertained by Mr. Gould, co-surveyor to the United States government, to be 2 hours, 51 minutes, 56.5 seconds. The Sun passes over the Earth and returns to the same point in 24 hours. If in 2 hours, 51 minutes, and 56.5 seconds, it passes from the meridian of the Valencia end of the cable to that of its termination at Heart's Content, a distance of 1,942 statute miles, how far will it travel in 24 hours? On making the calculation, the answer is 16,265 statute miles. This result is only 3 miles greater distance than that obtained by the first process. Again, in the Boston Post, for October 30th, 1856, Lieutenant Maury gives the following as the correct distances in geographical miles across the Atlantic by the various routes, circle sailing. The chart, nautical miles and statute miles, shows Philadelphia to Liverpool at 3,000 nautical miles and 3,500 statute miles. New York to Liverpool, 2,880 miles nautical, 3,360 statute miles. Boston to Liverpool, 2,720 nautical miles, 1,173 statute miles. New York to Southampton, 2,980 nautical miles, 3,476 statute miles. Southampton to Glasgow, 2,800 nautical miles, 3,266 statute miles. Boston to Galway, 2,520 nautical miles, 2,940 statute miles. Newfoundland to Galway, 1,730 nautical miles, 2,018 statute miles. Boston to Belfast, 2,620 nautical miles, 3,056 statute miles. If we take the distance given in the above table between Liverpool and New York as 3,360 statute miles, and calculate as in the last case, we find a nearly similar result, making allowance for the detour around the south or north of Ireland. The difference of time between London and New York, which the use of the electric cable makes a matter of some consequence, has latterly been ascertained afresh. It is 4 hours, 55 minutes, 18.95 seconds. The results of these several methods are so nearly alike that the distance of 16,262 statute miles may be safely taken as the approximate circumference of the Earth at the latitude of Valencia. If the distance from Valencia to the Cape of Good Hope, or to Cape Horn, had ever been actually measured, not calculated, the circumference of the Earth at these points could, of course, be readily ascertained. We cannot admit as evidence the calculated length of a degree of latitude, because this is an amount connected with the theory of the Earth's rotundity, which has been proved to be false. We must therefore take known distances between places far south of Valencia, where latitude and longitude have also been carefully observed. In the Australian Almanac for 1871, page 126, the distance from Auckland, New Zealand to Sydney is given as 1,315 miles, nautical measure, which is equal to 1,534 statute miles. At page 118 of the Australian Almanac for 1859, Captain Stokes, HMS Acheron, communicates the latitude of Auckland as 36 degrees 50 minutes 5 seconds south, and longitude 174 degrees 50 minutes 40 seconds east. Latitude of Sydney, 33 degrees 51 minutes 45 seconds south, and longitude 151 degrees 16 minutes and 15 seconds east. The difference in longitude or time distance is 23 degrees 34 minutes 25 seconds, calculating as in the case of Valencia to Newfoundland. We find that as 23 degrees, 34 minutes, and 25 seconds represents 1,534 statute miles, 360 degrees will give 23,400 statute miles as the circumference of the Earth at the latitude of Sydney, Auckland, and the Cape of Good Hope. Hence the radius or distance from the center of the north to the above places is, in round numbers, 3,720 statute miles. Calculating in the same way, we find that from Sydney to the Cape of Good Hope is fully 8,600 statute miles. The above calculations receive marked corroboration for the practical experience of mariners. The author has many times been told by captains of vessels navigating the southern region that from Cape Town to Port Jackson in Australia, the distance is not less than 9,000 miles, and from Port Jackson to Cape Horn, 9,500 miles. But as many are not willing to give credit to such statements, the following quotation will be useful and will constitute sufficient evidence of the truth of the foregoing calculations. The Great Britain steamer has arrived, having made one of the best voyages homeward that has yet been effected, viz. 86 days, 72 only of which were employed in steaming, and the remaining 14 days being accounted for by detentions. She left Melbourne on January 6 and arrived in Simon's Bay on Feb 10th, or 35 days. She then went round to Cape Town, whence she sailed on the 20th of February, and was afterwards detained for 4 days at St. Michael's and Vigo. The distance she steamed per log was 14,688 miles, which for the 72 days gives an average of 204 miles a day. If we multiply the average rate of sailing by the 35 days occupied in running between Melbourne and St. Simon's Bay, near Cape of Good Hope, we find that the distance is 7,140 nautical miles. From Melbourne to Sydney is 6 degrees of longitude, or about 340 nautical miles. Hence 7,140 added to 340 gives 7,480 nautical miles, equal to 8,726 statute miles, which is 126 miles in excess of the distance given at page 94. The following extract furnishes additional evidence upon this important point. Extraordinary voyage. Every yachtsman, says the Dublin Express, will share in the pride with which a correspondent relates a brilliant, and we believe unexampled exploit which has just been performed by a small yacht of only 25 tons, which is not a stranger to the waters of Dublin Bay. The gallant little craft set out from Liverpool for the Antipodes, and arrived safely in Sydney after a splendid run, performing the entire distance, 16,000 miles, in 130 days. As the distance from Melbourne to Cape of Good Hope is 7,140 nautical miles, as shown by the log of the Great Britain, and as the whole distance from Melbourne to Liverpool was 14,688 nautical miles, it follows that, deducting 7,140 from 14,688, that the passage from the Cape of Good Hope to Liverpool was 7,548 nautical miles. If we take this distance from the 16,000 miles which the above-mentioned yacht sailed to Sydney, we have as the distance between Cape of Good Hope and Sydney 8,450 nautical, or 9,806 statute miles. In a letter from Adelaide which appeared in the Leeds Mercury for April 20th, 1867, speaking of certain commercial difficulties which had existed there, the following incidental passage occurs. Just as our harvest was being concluded, the first news arrived of anticipated dearth of breadstuffs at home. The times were so hopelessly dull, money was so scarce, and the operation of shipping wheat a distance of 14,000 miles so dangerous, that for a long time the news had no practical effect. From England to Adelaide is here stated at 14,000 nautical, or 16,333 statute miles. And as the difference of longitude between Adelaide and Sydney is 23 degrees, equal to 1,534 statute miles, we find that from England to Sydney the distance is 17,867 statute miles. Taking from this the 7,548 nautical, or 8,806 statute miles, we have again 9,061 statute miles as the distance between the Cape of Good Hope and Sydney. From the preceding facts it is evident that the circumference of the Earth, at the distance of the Cape of Good Hope from the polar center, is not less in round numbers than 23,400 miles. Hence the radius or distance in a direct line from the polar center to Cape Town, to Sydney, to Auckland in New Zealand, and to all the places on the same arc, is about 3,720 statute miles. And as the distance from the polar center to Valencia in Ireland is shown to be 2,556 statute miles, the direct distance from Valencia to Cape Town is 1,164 statute miles. Should it ever be shown by actual direct measurement to be more than this distance, then the distance from Cape Town to Sydney must be more than 8,600 statute miles. It is a subject which must be kept open for rectification. What has already been given in the foregoing pages may be considered as the approximate minimum distances. Having seen that the diameter of the Earth's surface, taking the distance from Auckland in New Zealand to Sydney, and thence to the Cape of Good Hope, as a datum arc is 7,440 statute miles, we may inquire how far it is from any of the above places to the great belt of ice, which surrounds the southern oceans. Although large ice islands and icebergs are often met with a few degrees beyond Cape Horn, what may be called the solid immovable ramparts of ice seem to be as far south as 78 degrees. In a paper read by Mr. Locke before the Royal Dublin Society on Friday evening, November 19, 1860, and printed in the Journal of that Society, a map is given representing Antarctic discoveries, on which is traced a proposed exploration route by Captain Maury, USN, and in the third paragraph it is said, "I request attention to the diagram number 1, representing an approximate tracing of the supposed Antarctic continent, and showing the steamer track about 12 days from Port Phillip, the chief naval station of the Austral Seas, to some available landing point, bight or ravine, under shadow of the precipitous coast. The steamer track is given on this map as a dotted line, curving eastwards from 150 degrees to 180 degrees longitude, and from Port Phillip to 78 degrees south latitude. If we take the chord of such an arc, we shall find that the direct distance from Port Phillip to 78 degrees south would be about 9 days' sail, or 10 days from Sydney. No ordinary steamer would sail in such latitudes more than 150 statute miles a day. Hence 10 times 150 would be 1,500 miles, which added to the previously ascertained radius at Sydney would make the total radius of the Earth from the northern center to the farthest known southern circumference to be 5,224 statute miles. Thus, from purely practical data, setting all theories aside, it is ascertained that the diameter of the Earth, from the Ross Mountains, or from the volcanic mountains of which Mount Erebus is the chief, to the same radius distance on the opposite side of the northern center, is more than 10,400 miles, and the circumference is 52,800 statute miles.